Hey, welcome back to PetaPixel. It is Chris Nichols, and it's finally the review that you've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for. In fact, you've been waiting longer than it takes to get a free Stampede breakfast at Stampede time. It is the Fujifilm X-S20. Let's get to it. Hey Jordan, I know people are waiting a long time for this review, but I just can't stop thinking about PicFlow.
What? Tell me more!
So PicFlow is this amazing software that lets the photographer and the client collaborate on the final image. So first off, I can make client galleries, upload full res RAWs, and then the client can see that. They can make notes, annotations, suggestions, edits that they want to see. Then I can bring my editors and my retouchers into the conversation as well. And we can just all collaborate to make sure the images are the best possible. And the best part is that everybody involved will have access to the files through the PicFlow software, so you definitely want to check it out. You can get right now 50% off for the first 100 people that sign up through the link in the description below. So Jordan, get on it.
I'm on it.
All right, so now we do finally have a Fujifilm X-S20, and I'm excited to play with this. This is significant for me because the Fujifilm X-S10 is actually probably my favorite Fujifilm camera. I know I'm in the minority with that, but the fact of the matter is I really like the styling of it. I like the more modern SLR controls personally versus the sort of vintage kind of controls on the XT and XE series of cameras, but I also really like the value that it represented for the dollar. We actually recommended the X-S10 to pretty much everybody looking for a camera at that sort of $1,000 price point. Now we have the X-S20. Let's see what kind of upgrades we have, and let's start with handling. So the layout structure of the buttons is very similar to the Fujifilm X-S10, which is a good thing because that's what I like so much about the camera. Now, Fujifilm said they did kind of change the feel of buttons and dials, and I agree with that. I mean, when I first picked it up, it's been a long time since I used an X-S10, but everything feels just like a little bit stiffer, a little bit tighter, a little bit more pronounced, and I think that's actually a nice thing. Everything feels good. But I love how many control dials I have here. So I've got that front control dial, I've got my thumb dial, I've got another dial over here, so I can set my aperture on the lens, I can have my shutter speed here on the front dial, maybe my back dial can be exposure compensation. I can have this other control dial just to go through all my film simulation modes. I mean, you can customize this however you want. The autofocusing button on the back, you know, this selector joystick, it's a little bit small and fiddly, but it does have a more positive press when you're pushing it in. I do like that. Now, I always like the X-S10's grip, but this actually feels better. It's just a little bit wider, and that's to accommodate the brand new W235 battery. Now, this is a huge upgrade. I mean, we were going from about roughly 400 shots to now about 750 CPR rated shots in the normal power mode. Now on the side here we've got our USB-C port, and of course you can power the camera while it's running off USB-C power, micro HDMI. Now above here we've got our mic port, that's the same, but here's a big change. We now have a headphone jack. That means you don't have to tie up the USB-C port or use a dongle to have your headphones. I will say it's kind of in a weird position, but I'm glad that at least we have that now in the camera. Now we've also got a robust mode dial on here, which is to say there's lots of functions on it, 4 custom modes, filter effects, and there is a new vlogging setting, which Jordan's going to talk about. We do still have the pop-up flash as well that we had on the Fujifilm X-S10. I mean, I don't use this very often, but certainly on a bright sunny day like this, if you've got shadows on somebody's face or you're trying to shoot in darker areas with a lot of contrast, it might be nice to just provide a little bit of fill. Now the last thing is this, the camera does look a little bit bigger than maybe the XE or the XT series of cameras, especially the smaller XT20, 30 style cameras, but it's actually quite lightweight, 481 grams with a battery, and compared to other cameras in its class and price range, that's actually quite compact and lightweight, under 1/4 of a knot. Okay, so that's it for handling. I know you guys have been waiting a long time for this review, but let's wait a little bit longer and go take some photos. Come on! There's something you don't see every day, a mass of red beetles. If anybody knows what's going on, let us know, but I assume it's some sort of beetle orgy. Yeah. Yeah, yes, I know you've been waiting. We're doing the review right now. Like, we're doing it right now. Oh, art.
What are you taking pictures of?
Literally art. So at the heart of the Fujifilm X-S20, we've got the same Fuji X-Trans backside illuminated 26 megapixel sensor that we had in the X-S10, that we've had in a lot of Fujifilm cameras since 2018. And sure, it's not a brand new sensor, but we do have better processing power here, and that does give us some advantages when it comes to autofocus, things like that. But frankly, Jordan and I wanted this 26 megapixel sensor versus the newer 40 megapixel sensor because first off, we've got good color, good dynamic range, good detail for an APS-C camera, but it's also better for video, and primarily this camera is trying to be a powerful hybrid camera. We also do have a nice upgrade here. The X-S10 I always preferred over some of the other Fujifilm camera bodies in an affordable range because it had IBIS, 6 stops, but this now improves that to 7 stops. So we're getting a nice upgrade in the IBIS. This is still the most affordable Fujifilm body that gives you that IBIS, and compared to other brands that also give you IBIS in their cameras, this is an incredibly competitive price. Okay, so let's talk displays here. So first, this back panel, 3-inch, 1.84 million dot LCD back panel. That's actually pretty high res compared to the competition, and it's this fully articulating style. And I think obviously for video work that makes sense, for the vlog mode on this camera that makes sense, but even for photography, as nice as the tilting screens are on the other Fujifilm bodies, I think this works just great for photography, so I like that. Now, the EVF. 2.34 million dot EVF. Do I wish it was higher? Yes, but at the same time, the Sony a6700 is in the same category, the Canon EOS R7 is in the same category. I could criticize all 3 of these cameras for wanting more in my EVF, but at the price point, this is still just fine. So I know that guy just did it, Jordan, but I don't want to lay on this couch. It's like soaking wet. It's disgusting. Oh wait, there's one out in the sun over here. Okay, reclining on a dirty couch to make one small point, but now the X-S20 adds nostalgic neg to all the other Fujifilm fun color simulation modes. It is one of my favorites. I've been using it a lot today and just gives you that nice kick to the warm tones. Oranges, yellows, reds get a bit of a boost and just has that kind of classic vibe to it. Love it. Yes, I know. I'm doing it. I know. I'm doing it right now. So one of the big changes here on the Fuji X-S20 is the fact that we still have a single card slot, but now it's a UHS-2 rated SD card slot, and the buffer is actually pretty decent here. So shooting lossless compressed RAW files at 8 frames per second, we were getting basically pushing past 80 shots. That's basically 10 seconds of sustained burst shooting at 8 frames per second. That's actually pretty fantastic. I put it on par, maybe a little bit ahead of the Sony a6700. Now, if you're gonna shoot JPEGs, basically the processor and the buffer, you're able to shoot like 1,000 at 8 frames per second. I mean, just beyond whatever you'd want to do. Remember, on this camera, you can shoot 20 shots per second in electronic shutter mode. You could even do cropped JPEGs 30 frames per second, but I do still find this sensor to have a little bit of rolling shutter. I would think 8 frames per second mechanical is just about right. Jordan, I haven't been to the Crossroads flea market in like a decade. Let's go, it's the People's Market, yeah! Okay, so let's talk autofocus now on the Fujifilm X-S20. Now, although we still have the same sensor as the predecessor, we get better processing, and that brings a lot of cool stuff like the new subject detection mode. So now we're getting animals, but also planes, trains, motorcycles, automobiles, all that kind of stuff. I still do have the same complaint that I've had on the other Fujifilm bodies where human eye and face detection is separate from the subject detection modes. I really think they should be in the same menu, because what'll happen is I'll go to shoot automobiles or I'll go to shoot animals, and that automatically kicks me out of human eye and face detection. And even if I cancel the subject detection modes, I'm not in any detection mode. So then I have to go back into human detection, turn on the face, turn on the eye. It's just an extra step, so much so that I've actually customized a button to just automatically toggle eye detection on or off. It's odd that if you go into the full auto mode, it actually has automatic subject detection, which works pretty well, but if you go into any of the other modes like aperture priority, shutter priority, whatever, you can't actually let the subject detection be automatic. I hope they change that in the future. Still, let's actually talk about the performance. It's actually quite good. We're getting something very similar to what we see in the X-T4 or the X-T5. I mean, you can see here eye and face detection is working great from long distances. Fujifilm has definitely improved their autofocus game in the last few years, and the X-S20 is the beneficiary of all that. Okay, so we have quite a few upgrades when it comes to the photographic capabilities of the X-S20, but now we need to talk about video because that's one of the biggest upgrades. Let's go to Jordan.
Okay, Jordan here to talk about the video capabilities of the Fujifilm X-S20. And I'm very impressed with what they've been able to cram into a camera at this price. First of all, we get basically all the features that we saw on the X-T4 that were unavailable in the X-S10. So that means we're getting 4K 60 recording. You can do that in 10-bit. If you're willing to use that flimsy micro HDMI port, you can kick out ProRes RAW to an Atomos unit or B-RAW to a Blackmagic recorder at 6.2K. But they've also brought over some of the features that we first saw on the XH2S, a camera that costs almost twice as much as this. So we've got 6.2K open gate recording using the entire sensor up to 30 frames per second. And this is a mode I absolutely love for recomposing your shot, or if you have to deliver in horizontal and vertical, it's an absolute lifesaver. And I was also really happy to see the new F-Log 2 profile, which does offer more dynamic range than the previous F-Log, though on this camera you're not going to get quite as much as on the XH2S with its stacked sensor that can read out in 14-bit. With so much new on the X-S20, a lot of people were disappointed that we're using the older 26 megapixel sensor, but I think this is a perfect fit with this. Obviously, the stacked 26 megapixel chip in the XH2S is going to be too expensive to hit this kind of price. And the new 40 megapixel sensor is very capable for photography, but not really ideal for video. It is a much slower to read sensor than the older 26 megapixel one, so I'm glad they went with this. It's going to give you full width recording in 4K up to 30 frames per second, or again in open gate up to 30 frames per second. There is a crop when we jump over to 4K 60 mode, but thankfully the footage is still slightly oversampled, so you'll still get good detail there. All right, let's do a quick vlog with the X-S20 since this is something that the camera manufacturers are taking very seriously right now. Fujifilm has taken it so seriously that there's a vlog mode on the mode dial here. And this gives you really easy access for beginners to some commonly used functions when you're vlogging. They have a product mode where you can hold something up to the camera and it'll switch focus from your face to that object, and a background defocus, which will just shoot at the widest possible aperture and knock the background out, irregardless of the shutter speed that you've selected. And these are really handy things. They're right on the touch screen, so you can access them when the camera's pointed at you. It's funny, Sony has offered similar features to this for a while, but oddly enough, the A6700, Sony's competitor to the X-S20, doesn't have those features. So if you're looking for a hybrid camera with some vlog functionality, X-S20 has a lot to offer. But even if you're not using the vlog setting, this does have some nice functionality. We've got in-body image stabilization on it. I've got that turned on, as well as the digital image stabilization, which gives you a 1.1 crop factor in most of its 4K record modes. And I do find that the in-body stabilization is wonderful when you're trying to hold a shot steady, but if you're doing deliberate pans and tilts, it can sometimes be a little bit jerky. In terms of the autofocus, it does a really nice job with a single person like we've got right now, but in more complicated scenes, I really wish it had a tap to track function like we're seeing in the Sony, Canon, and new Nikon bodies. That would be a big upgrade. Okay, but enough of this beautiful outdoor footage. You want me to get back in my basement so I can test overheating, so let's go there next. Okay, we're back inside to talk about overheating on this camera, and I did the test the same way I typically do. So we're shooting indoors at room temperature with a half-hour cool down between all the tests. And I thought I'd start with the 6.2K open gate recording at 30 frames per second, seemed like the most demanding mode. And there I was able to record 34 minutes before the camera overheated and shut down. Following that up, I did 4K 60 and actually got very similar record times there. I was getting 36 minutes before the camera shut off. So both of those modes could pose a problem if you're recording very long takes like live music or sports or something like that. But when I switched it over to 4K 24p, then I was able to record over 2 hours. The camera was certainly warm at that point, but in controlled situations, I think the 4K 24 and 30 won't give you any issues. But the X-S20 is compatible with Fujifilm's fan accessory that you can clip on the back to get longer record times. Jumping back to the OpenGate 6.2K recording, I was able to look at the comments on YouTube asking me where the X-S20 video was for over an hour, and the camera didn't even give me an overheat warning and wasn't warm to the touch, so the fan is making an absolutely huge difference. If you are really worried about those overheat thresholds, just grab the fan. It's a shame it's an extra cost, but at least there is a really nice solution for you. So I would say that the X-S20 is just a very well-rounded camera and a huge step over the X-S10 if you're planning to use it as a video camera, but it doesn't exist in a bubble. In the future, we're going to be comparing it to the Canon R7, a very capable hybrid camera, and the Sony a6700. Now, all of these are excellent hybrid cameras, and I'm not going to tell you which one would be right for you now. You'll have to wait for that episode, but I can spoil things a little bit and say that for me personally, the X-S20 has the best balance of video features. I love having open gate recording. F-Log 2 is wonderful to work with, and the autofocus didn't really give me any issues. Back to you, Chris.
All right, so we are now coming to you from Ryan HK's studio here at Rad Studios. You may remember him from our recent Laowa 28mm f1.2 video. He has given me a tall boy of fantastic corn lager and lots of whiskey. So here we go for the conclusion. So the Fujifilm X-S20, I mean, a lot of people are saying on the internet, okay, this isn't that big an upgrade, they haven't really changed much, but really, if you think about it, even just as a photo camera strictly, they've upgraded almost every aspect of this camera. Yes, the sensor's the same, the controls are similar, but they didn't need changing. We now have a better IBIS unit, we've got more advanced autofocus, we have added film simulation modes. Let's also remember that the SD card slot's been upgraded, the buffer's decent, the battery life has been vastly improved. I mean, the camera also has substantially improved video capabilities. And I know a lot of people are saying, okay, well, I don't care about video. This is absolutely an excellent hybrid camera. But remember that Fujifilm is a company that makes excellent photo-based cameras as well. I mean, the X-T5 is really definitely more suited for high-end photographic applications. But if you're looking for a mid-range camera that can do pretty much everything, I think they've really done a great job here. So what are the alternatives and how does this compare to the competition? Well, first, compared to the Canon EOS R7, I actually really like the way the Canon EOS R7 handles, but I still think this is the best handling camera at this price. And now that we have support from Sigma and Tamron as far as lenses go, it really opens up the third-party support, something that Canon can't do. I think that's a real advantage here. Versus the Sony a6700, I do like that camera, but even though this doesn't have the vintage cachet of the XT cameras, it's still infinitely sexier than the Sony a6700. And I still prefer the handling here. The thing that the Sony really beats out on is still autofocus, but this is definitely improved over the older X-S10. And let's keep in mind that compared to both of those cameras, this is definitely more affordable. All right, so Fujifilm X-S20 review is finally done. You can stop commenting about when we're gonna do it. It's done, but definitely put your comments below about what you think about this camera. If you have any questions, we would love to see that. Big thanks to Ryan HK for getting me drunk. I really appreciate it every time I see you. And definitely do check out our podcast if you haven't already. It's on this channel, or you can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. You know, maybe when you're out shooting or driving to a photo shoot or cooking food or thinking about us in bed. Okay, otherwise, click that notification bell, subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon with more PetaPixel.
Okay, go sleep.
Thank you.